We, unaccustomed to courage, exiles from delight, live coiled in shells of loneliness until love leaves its high holy temple and comes into our sight to liberate us into life. Love arrives, and in its train come ecstasies, old memories of pleasure, ancient histories of pain. Yet, if we are bold, love strikes away the chains of fear from our souls. We are weaned from our timidity. In the flush of love's light, we dare be brave. And suddenly, we see that love costs all we are and will ever be. Yet it is only love which sets us free.
Please be seated. Weeks like this, I find myself searching. I find myself searching for a wisdom that will be a light to shine through the bleakness, for wisdom that will guide us, for wisdom that will comfort us, for wisdom we can share together. I remember back in 2008, Bishop Prince Singh of the Diocese of Rochester, New York, said, "In a time of crisis, we need to look to the experts. And in a time of economic crisis, the experts are the poor." It is a time of crisis, and the experts are those who, in the most challenging of circumstances, have learned not just to survive, but to thrive. And weeks like this, I find myself searching for that wisdom of endurance, of tenacity, that wisdom that will soften my heart even as I feel it hardening, that will give us as a church, us as a nation, what we need, not only but to survive, but to thrive for such a time as this. And I know it is time to look to the experts. And so I open up the scriptures and I turn to Maya Angelou. We, unaccustomed to courage, exiles from delight, live coiled in shells of loneliness until love leaves its high holy temple and comes into our sight to liberate us into life. Now, if you remember I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, you remember Maya Angelou's story of exile and liberation. When Maya Angelou was 8 years old, she was raped by her mother's boyfriend. 8 years old. She told her brother about it, and after the boyfriend had spent one night in jail, Maya's uncles found him and kicked and beat him to death. And Maya was so traumatized by the rape and the murder that she didn't speak a word, not just for a few days or even months, for years. She wrote, "I thought my voice killed him. I killed that man because I told his name. And then I thought I would never speak again because my voice would kill anyone." Maya inhaled book after book of poetry, but when she exhaled, not one word came out. And then she met Bertha Flowers. Now, Mrs. Flowers was a teacher at her school. Mrs. Flowers was loving, she was faithful, she was patient. She didn't force or try to trick words out of Maya. She met her where she was in her pain, loved her in the midst of her pain, slowly, patiently gave her the courage not to be a prisoner of her pain. They sat together and they would read the poetry that Maya loved. Mrs. Flowers' voice helping Maya feel the deeper meaning the words took when a human voice released them into the air. And gradually, slowly, patiently, Mrs. Flowers loved the words from Maya's lips. You do not love poetry, not until you speak it, Mrs. Flowers said to young Maya. And finally, at age 13, Maya Angelou opened her lips and poetry took wing from her tongue. After 5 years of silence, love had set her free. It is a time of crisis. We need to look to the experts, and Maya Angelou delivers the wisdom we need. We are weaned from our timidity. In the flush of love's light, we dare be brave. And suddenly we see that love costs all we are and will ever be. Yet, it is only love which sets us free. 2 speeches this week captured my attention. Mitt Romney's on the floor of the Senate and the president's at the National Prayer Breakfast. Don't wait for it. And as I watched each, 2 things struck me. The first is that 2 men spoke truths they absolutely believed. Only one spoke his truth at great risk, and the other used his truth to put others at great risk. One risked a cost, the other exacted a price. But more than that, I was struck what that difference did in my heart, what that did to my soul. As I listened to Senator Romney speak, I was uplifted. I felt hope. I felt freedom. As I listened to Senator Romney risk the wrath of power to speak his conscience, I was touched by the same angel of which the cage bird sings. We, unaccustomed to courage, exiles from delight, live coiled in shells of loneliness until love leaves its high holy temple and comes into our sight to liberate us into life. But then I stopped and asked myself, would I feel the same way if I disagreed with him? Would I feel the same way if his courage convicted a president I supported? Now, the truth is, there is no way of knowing, and all I can say is I think so, and more than that, I hope so. I hope that I haven't become so jaded and suspicious that I still wouldn't trust and be moved by someone displaying such courage and vulnerability for an outcome which I opposed. I think so. I hope so. Because what I felt inside was not a partisan vindication of one more vote for our side, yes, but it was hope and it was freedom. For we have become unaccustomed to courage. And in that moment, even if just for a moment, I could feel love striking away the chains of fear from our national soul. And then I listened to the president give a soliloquy of fear, derision, and vindictiveness, and I was filled with pain, and I was filled with sadness, and I was filled with rage. As I listened to the president, my heart was tempted to hatred. But then again, I had to stop, and I asked myself, would I feel the same way if I agreed with him? What if I were one of the faith leaders in that room, nodding and clapping and smiling and laughing? In that moment, what would be in my heart? And that's when I realized I have been there. I have heard speeches like that. I have probably given speeches like that, where I have called out enemies believing that I was on the side of the angels, where I confused God's righteousness of loving enemies with my own self-righteousness of defeating not injustice or systemic evil, but an enemy with a name, a face, a story. And in those moments, I did feel righteous. I felt powerful in those moments in that way. Being a group bound together in conviction of righteousness makes us feel powerful. And I felt good in those moments. But what I didn't feel in those moments was love. What I didn't feel in those moments was joy. I felt righteous in those moments. I felt strong. But while I felt my neck stiffen and my chest swell, I did not feel my heart soften. I did not feel my spirit soar. I felt strong, but I did not feel free. We, unaccustomed to courage, exiles from delight, live coiled in shells of loneliness until love leaves its high holy temple and comes into our sight to liberate us into life. As I watched and listened to the president, I was struck most deeply by how loveless and joyless he was as he spoke. And then I looked at the faces of those on the dais and in the audience, and as I looked on them, I could see necks stiffen and chests swell, and I saw some smiles on some faces, but I could see no evidence of heart softening. I could see no evidence of spirit soaring. I could hear him rattling those chains of fear, but I could not hear the songs of love that set us free. You are the light of the world. That's what Jesus says in this morning's reading from Matthew. We are the light of the world. Light in the Greek, phos, not just brightness or brilliance, but truth. Jesus, echoing the psalmist and linking light and truth, reminds us that it's not enough for us merely to speak our truth. We have to ask, is it a truth that brings light to the bleakest places, not one that merely consigns a different group to the shadows? Is it a truth that makes hearts soften and spirits soar and not necks stiffen and chests swell? Is it a truth that makes us march lockstep into battle or be broken open and dance? Is it a truth that brands people as enemies? Or is it a truth that echoes the wisdom of Maya Angelou when she sang, "A wise woman wishes to be no one's enemy. A wise woman refuses to be anyone's victim." Jesus looks deep into our eyes and says, "You are the truth of the world. Let your truth shine." Isaiah exhorts us, "Shout for all you are worth. Raise your voice like a trumpet." But what shall we shout? It is a time of crisis. Lives are at stake. It is no time for silence. So we look to the experts for wisdom. What poetry will be coaxed from the pain of our lives and take wing from our lips? Does the prophet bid us take our pain and shout, "Crush your enemies"? Does the prophet bid us take our anger and shout, "Beat them down and lock them up"? No. It is a time of crisis, and the prophet coaxes from our lips, long silent, the poetry of love, the songs of freedom. Remove the chains of injustice. Undo the ropes of the yoke. Let those who are oppressed go free and break every yoke you encounter. Share your bread with those who are hungry and shelter homeless people. Clothe those who are naked and do not hide from the needs of your own flesh and blood. Do this, and your light will shine like the dawn, and your healing will break forth like lightning. Your integrity will go before you, and the glory of God will be your rear guard. Cry, and God will answer. Call, and God will say, "I am here," provided you remove from your midst all oppression, finger-pointing, and malicious talk. We are people of light and truth. Light and truth that strikes away the chains of fear, that liberates us into life. Light and truth that does not make our necks stiffen and our chests swell, but our hearts soften and our spirits soar. That companions us through the valleys of deep grief, old memories of pleasure, ancient histories of pain. Light and truth that comes from communities bound together, not by a common enemy, but by love and joy. Love, joy. That's our charge. That is our destiny. To create communities of courageous truth with love and joy at the center. That's how we become the city on the hill, the lamp on the stand. not by being right and defeating those who are wrong, but by letting God's love flow through us, that strikes away the fear from every soul, that softens every heart and bids every foot and wheel dance and every spirit take flight. The greatest temptation of this day is the lie that we have an enemy that must be defeated at all costs, that we must raise up an army to march lockstep against the foe. The battle cries are already sounding. You've heard them. Lace up your boots. Get in formation. Yet I am here to tell you, if we answer that call, we will only prolong the war and become the enemy we long to vanquish. For the enemy is not a person or a party. The enemy is power without love and community without joy. The enemy is choosing the lockstep march over the wild and fabulous dance. Now, there is an urgency to the present moment. Lives are at stake, and those lives will not be saved by us turning on one another, by putting anyone, even those most offensive to us, even those most dangerous to the most vulnerable among us, in the crosshairs. Those lives will only be saved by putting our hearts, our bodies, our lives on the line with, for those who themselves are in the crosshairs of others. We are the truth of the world, Jesus reminds us. And that truth is the greatest power in this universe is love. Love that softens our hearts and makes our spirits soar. Love that refuses to let anyone steal our joy. Love that takes our pain and anger and through its grace and patience coaxes poetry from our long silent lips and liberates us into life. So, dear ones, take courage. Take heart, take love, take joy. Take off your combat boots and put on your dancing shoes. Embrace the freedom to love without boundaries. Shout for all you are worth. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Let love open our lips long silent, and from them draw songs of courage and freedom and joy. May we become the light of truth, the light of life, the light of love, for in the flush of love's light, we dare be brave. And suddenly we see that love costs all we are and will ever be. Yet it is only love which sets us free. Amen.